Welcome to r/entitled people, where we share stories from your lives about people who think the rules don't apply to them and they should get what they want. Thank you, friends, for subscribing to the channel and for so many likes. And today we have 3 great stories, so subscribe, hit the like button, and let's begin. The first story: got treated different by HR. Sent an email to all students and interns and encouraged them to do the same. Company folded because of flood of emails. The second story: how the company lost its key employees in an instant. The third story: a routine cleaning at a car wash led to the arrest of one entitled woman. The first story is: I bullied HR to follow the law. So I, 20 male at the time, worked for a big billion-dollar company with about 8,000 employees nationwide, represented in the entire EU. I worked for them as a student for 20 hours a week for over 2 years besides my studies, and everything was great. Small team of mostly younger people who were exceptionally nice. Great boss who really cared about his employees, and very valuable experience in my field, plus above average pay. With no set working hours and the ability to clock in and out, digitally with our badge, important later, whenever you want. As long as you don't miss any important meetings, we had free reign. That was until the beginning of 2020 when the pandemic hit. Specifically in the beginning of March when the whole country went into lockdown and our location was closed for everyone until further notice. Nowadays, many students who work for a company may get a laptop and have the opportunity to work from home. Not here. Barely any full-time employees had the ability before the pandemic, let alone students. And when the demand for laptops and work from home skyrocketed, our very old-timey IT department was at a loss, with nowhere near the ability to satisfy the demand. First, our engineers and management got laptops or remote workstations. With over 3,000 in our headquarters alone, you can imagine what was left for students. Nada. Alrighty, no problem. No ability to work and all projects on hold. It seems like an easy few weeks off until we get the ability to work remotely, or are able to get back into the office. Or so I thought. Problem is, the law and HR rules differ greatly between full-time employees and students and interns. While they have the protection and benefit of getting full pay in this situation, short-term employees such as us do not, which meant that we accumulated negative hours every week that we didn't work. You see, our clocking in system was simple. Your weekly hours were added up. If you worked more, it was added to your total and you could take an extra few days off. If you worked less, you had the ability to make it up until the end of the year, or carry them over to the next until your contract ends. But crucially, when you were in the negative by the end of your employment, you had to pay back what you were paid from your fixed salary. As we now know, the pandemic lasted more than a few weeks, and when I was allowed back at the office, 3 months have gone by, which meant a whole F-ton of negative hours. 20 hours times 4 weeks times 3 months times 14 euros equals 3,360 euros. I tried to work as much as possible to get them back to zero, but no luck. There was no work to be done for a student at the time, and I was lucky to get enough work for 20 hours a week. Side note, that was only possible because my boss thankfully asked around and had me move to a different department, which luckily had work. That department, archives. Down in a dark cellar, copying, sorting, and stowing endless amounts of meaningless paper that had accumulated for years. That's where I met a few fellow students that were sent there just as I was. And on the horizon was the renewal of my contract, which was due every 6 months. Up until now, there was never a problem. If your boss liked you and you wanted to stay, there wasn't even a discussion. But now the company kicked out every intern, student, short-term or external employee. And my deadline was 2 months away, with over 800 hours minus on my record, many of which were quite old that I originally hoped to get back during summer vacation. I was at a loss. I didn't have the money to pay back those hours at the end of my contract, and so naturally I complained to my family about it, who shared my frustration and told me to hit up my uncle, who was a lawyer. I explained everything to him and he got to effing work. He dug out anything he could and sent me a legal text to copy and paste to HR, which went a little something like this. In times of unexpected inability to work, blah blah blah, no option provided. The cost must fall on the employer, not the employee, and such applies here. Hereby we request all hour that me was not able to work to be negated. This I emailed to HR and a fight ensued. I was CC'd to members of the legal department and many higher-ups, but ultimately I was given back the hours that I missed during the lockdown. Needless to say, I was ecstatic and expected the same to happen to all my fellow students and interns. I asked HR and they promised me they were right on it. Nice. I reported my success to my colleagues in the archive bunker, and they were just as happy as I was. All of them had accumulated incredible amounts of negative hours during the pandemic and all seemed well. A small success for the students. But after weeks of asking whether or not they've gotten an email from HR, or if their negative hours had changed, I got frustrated and again asked HR if they were planning on implicating a general rule, which they assured me they were. But after many more weeks, I got too frustrated and broke. You see, there was an email list for students and interns that was originally pre-pandemic used by everyone to meet up and drink in a fun little group. There were about 800 plus people in the nationwide email list, and from time to time you would get an invitation to meet in a bar. Every student/intern was encouraged by the HR initiation letter to sign up to this email list, and many did. So I wrote the most widespread email I've written in my entire life to everyone on the list. Hey, fellow student from X location here, all my corona hours were wiped, and here's what I wrote to HR to do it. With a detailed guide on what to say, and if they did this for me, they sure as SH should do it for you. And an encouragement to tell everyone that may not be on the list. I was CC'd in hundreds of emails to HR within hours, and many more thanked me in emails that they had the same problem that I did and didn't know how to pay back those hours when their contract ended. Many more emails with technical questions, with their bosses in HR and CC, to which I happily replied with my best knowledge of how I was treated by HR, and they would have to get the same treatment. The next day I got into the office, I started my morning with a glorious company-wide email that I remember as follows. We, the gracious HR, have considered genuinely and decided that all students and interns may have their corona hours revoked. Thank me, you peasantry students. Please don't email us anymore. Please. I left the company months later, with amazing memories and a wholesome goodbye from all my coworkers. But at the end of the day, I learned this. F the HR. They work for the company, not for you. Edit. The sad thing is, many students were convinced by their bosses to put their contract on hold during the pandemic, meaning they were not eligible to the same treatment that we the rest of us were. They may not have accumulated negative hours during their pause, but they couldn't get them back after the fact. The second story is, EM wants me to detail her car for $15. So I, 15 male, have been working at a local car wash for over a year, and have had a few entitled people get their car washed, but this is easily the worst. So first, a little backstory. The car wash I work at is usually very busy, and because I work until closing, which is only 5:30, I have to stay until every car is through. We have an express interior service where you get out of the car after it's washed, and wait for someone to guide you into a lane, for it to be done, and when people pull themselves in it just to annoy me because then someone has to deal with them. So this day I was cashiering where I'm in charge of cutting off the line for people to come in, so we don't get more people after 5:25, so I just cut off the interior line as someone was pulling in, and this is where it started. EM. Can you open that for me? Me. No sorry, if you're getting an interior done then you have to be here before 5:15. The EM eventually wears me down and I let her through and she asks me how long it'll be until she'll be though. And I tell her about 20 to 30 minutes because everything was backed up. She flips out and I explain she can move to the other lane, where people get the exterior wash only, or she could leave if she didn't want to wait. She then explains to me that she needs her car cleaned and decides to wait. About 15 minutes later I let the car in front of her through, and put the cone back so she couldn't get through, so her response is to roll down her window and yell at me. Are you serious? Why did you cut me off? I respond politely but annoyed, that our lanes were full, and she needed to wait a little longer. She still berates me, and this is when the owner, who I'll call Jane, gets involved. Now Jane is an older woman, but she doesn't take BS from anybody. Jay, what's the problem? Me, this woman is yelling at me after I politely explained how our lanes are full, and we don't have many people. EM, your employees cut me off as I was about to go through, and cussed me out because of my skin. Let me just say this woman was whiter than Michael Jackson, and I'm also very pale, so I don't know where she was getting this from, but I digress. Jay, look, we're heavily understaffed, and if you want, you can start to work right now. I'll give you a t-shirt and there are sausage sandwiches for employees. But unless you're gonna help us, then you can stay right here, and wait like everybody else did. The EM was shocked and growled that she would wait. 10 minutes later, I let her through and she asks for a platinum exterior and a detail. I tell her that we don't do details and it's an express interior, and it's just to get it clean, but we don't try everything to get every speck of dirt out. She seems to accept this and just get the interior and goes through. I go to the back to help, since if I didn't, I would be sitting around doing nothing, and Jane always wants people to help, and never sit around and do nothing. So I go to the back and start helping. We just finished the interior in lane 1, where we put everything for closing, so I pull the person out of the lane and go get the recycling bin from outside, and this woman pulls herself into lane 1 and gets out. I'm peeved at this point and I know I just have to deal with it, so I clean the car like normal with everyone else and call this woman over. I should mention that there was something like glue or wax on the dashboard, and we couldn't get it off. She comes to her cars and she's the person we're waiting on so we all can leave, and she starts to ask if we can wipe off the doors and seats because of the kick marks, which we normally do, but forgot to because we were just focusing on getting it done. So I wiped them down and I thought that would be the end of it, until she brings up the dashboard and asks why we didn't get that stuff off, and I told her we tried but couldn't, and she also had stuff everywhere in her car and we couldn't vacuum well. She then proceeded to tell me that she paid over $30 for this, and I went to get the GM who was working that day. He looks at what she was talking about, and this particular GM doesn't care, because she's been forced to stay later when he has to be somewhere and deal with this bee, and tells her that to get it off she would have to go to a dealer instead of coming to a car wash, and expecting a detail out of $15. She threatens to call the cops due to entitled BS number 3, and we tell her she can because she's on video and we're staying here late to deal with this crap. Cops arrive and she says we stole from her and assaulted her, and her kid who was quietly standing there looking embarrassed. She did get one thing correct though. She said we were cursing like we were trying to summon Satan, and I'll admit we were messing around since most of us are friends, and act like idiots, but none of it was directed towards her. Eventually the police say there's nothing that they can do, and she goes full on crazy and spits on him, then tries to slap him and gets arrested for assaulting a police officer. The kid's dad picks him up and apologized for his wife's behavior, and we just asked him to take care of the car outside, and so we can close and we could get it towed for him, and he agreed. I'm really sorry for that kid and his dad, and I hope that crazy woman has to stay away for a few years, and the kid and dad get to live a good life without her. And the last story is, the company I work for is losing all 3 key team members in our department within 2 weeks at a critical time. I've worked at the same company for over 2 years. My team members and I all started with the company within 5 months of each other right before the pandemic started, and we work amazingly well together. We got the company through many difficult times over the course of the past 2 years, often putting in 70 to 80 hours a week each to meet deadlines. We've been essential in implementing new software over the past year and a half, which is supposed to streamline many of our manual processes and allow more time for much needed analysis. Fast forward to implementation date, and the team is told that once we get through the first quarter, they're restructuring the department, and the team is being split up and we're being assigned all new tasks. No one in management thought to talk to any of us about splitting up the team, or how we felt about restructuring the department. We've all been unhappy at our job for a while. There have been many things going on at the company that have made us all want to quit the past year, but made the decision together to all stick it out because we were such a strong team. Well, after we were informed we would be split up, we decided as a team once again that we would all start looking for new jobs, and made sure we weren't competing with each other by applying at the same companies. We all 3 had some vacation time in March, and we all took that time to do interviews and find other employment. Last Friday, one of us had our last day, and this Thursday and Friday are mine and the other person's last day. Not discussing such a huge change with the individuals directly involved has ultimately cost the company 3 key employees. Subscribe, click the like button if you want to support the channel. Thank you for watching.